I've got more.
Mine is dated November 15th.
Yeah. Well, we'll so note it.
We'll so note, okay. I think it was the one he sent out earlier that is correct. Maybe only, I sent that to everyone.
Right.
Right. Are there any comments on the minutes? Any changes? Good. All those in favor of the minutes? John, would you like to go into the timeline and the website?
Yeah, okay.
John, Jerry, John, Jean, Jerry. Jerry, could you please?
So you've all seen the timeline before, and basically we're kind of working backwards. The red line all the way to the right is the line that funding ends for Granite State Future. The yellow line is like June 30, 2014. That's when we should have a draft ready of the entire document. We're going to send it to the Nashua Regional Planning Commission. They are the grantee with HUD. We are the sub-grantee. And then we backed up to show different chapters being done. And I'm not going to go through all the details, but generally we're on timeline. We're making we're not getting everything done exactly on the date that we said it was going to be done because there's certain things beyond our control that we'll talk about a little bit later. But generally we are adhering to this timeline and we want to stick with it. Our next meeting is going to be January the 22nd, and we'll have some more chapters to be developed then. So just to let you know that. So we're sticking to the timeline. Does anybody have any questions about this?
How are the other RPCs doing in terms of being on?
Well, everybody's doing it differently. Some RPCs say, well, we like to have half our chapters written by January 1st. Some other ones are saying they're doing it incrementally, just like us. So they're not adhering to the strict timeline that we are, but they all realize that they have to get a draft in by June 30, 2014, and all funding ends by December 30th, and they realize that their commission has to adopt it in the fall of 2014.
So they're all participating, fully engaged, marching towards the same dates.
Right, exactly.
Oh, good.
And then Nashua, as the grantee, is going to have to take all this information and kind of review it for consistency, because we're building from the bottom up. We want to use all the regional plans to help formulate a state development plan. And all the state agencies have bought into that, the Office of Energy and Planning. So Nashua is going to take those months to make sure there's consistency among the various regional plans.
It was great to notice in the newspaper that the Office of Energy and Planning was highlighted in that they have not developed a state plan for over 10 years. And this effort really is directed to do that.
Yeah.
That was neat.
Yeah, I think they mentioned in particular a state economic development plan, which they're charged under legislation to do, as opposed, in addition to a state development plan. They haven't done it, and they say, well, it's been a lack of funding, and that's probably true. I just saw in today's paper where a state rep from Bedford wants to have DRED, Resources and Economic Development, prepare a economic development strategy for the state. So that would take that kind of away from OEP and put it in economic development.
What people want and what people fund are two different things.
Exactly. And the wants exceed the funding.
Jerry, I just have a quick question
Yes.
for Jerry on the timeline. Are you anticipating that we're on schedule now to get everything done by June 30th, or are there some things that I think I heard you say something that there might be they're not going to be, they're delaying that possibility?
Well, our goal is to have everything done in draft form by June 30. We'd like to have had the housing done today, but there's information from the state that we're waiting for in terms of future housing production needs that we need in order to complete it. That's not going to be available to January or February. That's what I meant by some of the things beyond our control. So what we have today is an interim draft report on housing. But generally the goal is to get everything done. You know, the transportation plan is not done today, although we do have parts of it done. And we did the transportation workshop, which is going to inform the transportation plan. And hopefully in a month or so, that document will be available, so.
Do you have a concern?
Well, I think it's real important that if the process that we've set up is to have each chapter recommended by the advisory committee, that the schedule we set up was today, the initial schedule was to have some of these chapters now that have been delayed to have actually been approved at this meeting today, and I was just wanted to make sure that the schedule accommodates that. My only concern would be if any revision in the schedule was impeding that possibility, then I think the schedule would need to be reviewed, and it might be important to have maybe a couple of meetings and maybe even within a month in order to stay on schedule, because it's easy to let things slide, and we definitely want to meet that July 1st deadline.
Right.
I think
we
I know the
yes.
staff well enough that they're all aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to make sure that that's all been thought through and that it was shared with the entire committee.
It kind of gets back to the discussion we had in the last meeting, you know, do we want to have more meetings, or do we want to take one meeting and do a lot more work in one meeting? And we talked about having more frequent meetings, but I think the consensus was let's do as much as we can in a meeting. But we have a timeline, everybody's aware of it, we're trying to move forward and get this done.
I think that it's something we can look at the next meeting particularly, because by then we should have the two that have slowed down right now. Hopefully we will have those ready for some kind of approval, tentative approval, anyway, draft approval. And the three more that we're dealing with outlines today ought to come in. I think what my concern along that same line is just to make sure that the participants are not being overwhelmed by the quantity of information that's being sent, that does have to be sent out because of this. And you know, the fact that this one isn't, that these two are not complete, means that the next time there are these two chapters plus the next three or whatever. So it's just a larger quantity. And what I had asked, if it was possible that maybe we could just send them out a little more often rather than all in one lump, because it's a lot to read when it all comes at once.
Right.
And maybe in January, the beginning of January, you and I could talk about this and see if it's possible to send one or two of these chapters 2 weeks before the meeting rather than just everything 1 week before the meeting.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good idea, and we like to do that. So.
Okay.
Just a couple of more items. Granite State future website. On that website, we are putting up all our meeting notices, all our workshop information. These documents, plan documents, are up on the website. So that's where we're keeping all the information related to the Lakes Region plan is on that. So if you just go to the website, it has a map of the state and the Planning Commission, just click on Lakes Region, and then you'll see meetings and workshops and then planning documents. And that's.
Now, when you say planning documents, what are you talking about?
Oh, I'm talking about the draft vision statement, the economic development chapter, the housing chapter, the plan outlines, and all the information that you've received. So it's available for the public.
Thank you.
Did you send out anything recently? Any new chapters or?
Well, last week we sent out a draft interim housing chapter.
I don't think I got that. I recalled 2 weeks before you said you would be sending something out.
Yeah. It went out on Friday.
Well, I can get them for you because they're in the back.
Did everybody else get them?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
No. It might be somewhere in my 2,000 emails there.
Yeah.
Backed up, but I don't recall it getting it.
Gene, I believe you got it.
Yes, and if I get it, everybody should get it because my computer is awful. My server is terrible, but this came in, and it contains the draft, again, a draft of the housing section, and the first time we have a draft of the transportation section, because we've not had that one. And then we have 3 outlines, which are the water infrastructure, the natural hazards, and the energy efficiency. Those 3 outlines were in the material. So we do have a problem. How are we going to make sure these get there?
Well, mine might be there.
I'll double check and let you know,
Okay.
so don't cause any
Well,
additional work.
if 2 of you didn't get
My
it.
mistake, I have the same problem, I get a lot of mail. It's easy to miss something, but I haven't deleted anything in a while, so I can check.
Okay.
Right.
Well, how about if I check in with you and David after the meeting to see if you got it, and then if you haven't gotten it, we'll try to figure out a different way of getting it to you.
You have the ability within your system, my company used to be able to do this, that when an individual opens the attachment or the email itself, that it sends a message back to the
right.
sender that it has been received.
Right. A receipt requested.
Yeah,
Yeah, we could attach that to emails.
I think that would give you more comfort that the darn things have gone through.
It won't work for them too.
Yes.
That's one more thing to monitor.
Yes.
Yeah, but that way they don't have the insecurity that you didn't get something.
But I think we also discussed last time, e-reports versus paper. I can't remember what we actually decided, but I know I'm somewhere in between. I want to conserve resources, but I have a hard time keeping track of stuff that I don't have in the hard copy. Particularly if I have a comment about it. I read it.
Yes, yes.
I read it online, I don't print the whole thing out.
Yeah.
Another $40 a cartridge of paper.
That's right.
Well, if you prefer to receive it hard copy, we'd be happy to do that.
I would for limited things like this, that I would like to read closely and make notes so they can probably bring to the next meeting.
Right.
But I don't think it has to be, it can be limited to those critical documents as far as I'm concerned.
No, I support that. I'm of a different generation than Barry. They can do everything in the cloud. When I'm serious about focusing on something, I have to print the darn thing out.
Yeah.
And I'm untrainable, so forget about it.
Well, what shall we make a decision on that everyone would like to have sent to them, or at least of the 4 of us here, would like to have sent to you a printout of the chapter that we're going to be voting on at that next meeting. And the ones that are outlined are usually only 2 pages, so I mean those we could print out ourselves or else look at them. Would that be reasonable to do?
That's a good plan.
Is that reasonable for
Yeah,
you to do?
okay.
Right. So when it's the chapter that's coming up for consideration or comment by all of us, it should be sent out.
Maybe we'll do it
At
both
least
ways, electronic and hard
But
copy.
it certainly can be, yes, so you can read it and comment on it. I eventually printed out mine myself this time because I just found that there was so much in the housing chapter that I wanted to have a look at. And the transportation one, the same way, that I just needed to see it in front of me, to see these. I found it difficult to read the maps, that it was easier to read the maps printed out than it was to read the maps on the screen.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had another?
And just one last item, public relations strategy. And
Right.
basically what I meant by that is trying to get the word out about the Lakes Region Plan and what we're doing, and we've used workshops. We've had a housing workshop and a transportation workshop, and I think both of those were successful. I'm just wondering, are there any other avenues you think we should consider in terms of getting the information out? We do have the website, we have our website, we could do press releases, we could have more meetings.
I think the press release is very, very good, because so many people read newspapers, and it's very important that we inform the public directly. There are efforts to divert this effort, local planning effort, for political reasons, that, and those people write prolifically, and it's a misinformation campaign. And so I think that it's very important that we just provide what's actually taking place, so that the people in our communities, in our 30 communities, actually can see, and then they'll understand.
Would it be possible to have the newspaper that you're talking about sent also to us, this statement of what, in a concise form, if you're writing it anyway? Because what I try to do is to go to selectmen's meetings in Freedom and tell the selectmen there what is happening, and what, because they've appointed me, and I kind of feel they ought to know every once in a while. Right. And they meet every single week, so I don't have to do that every single week, but I could once a month is what I try to aim for, and it would really be helpful for me if it could be written in, because there are other things happening related to this that I don't really initially know about.
So try to do more press releases, more public information.
Yes.
And how about letters to the editor? Should we consider that at all? Or?
I think more of the factual press release, where you can articulate things correctly, clearly. It is much better. The letters to the editors are, in my personal opinion, are getting out of hand.
They become too aggressive, and I don't think we need to be there. Would you people like to have sent to you this this news release or newsletter release as a summation of the different activities?
To add that to the email list, but also, does your list include the regular distribution of the planning boards?
We can send information. We do send information to the planning boards.
I know there is a regular distribution that they get, but specifically on the plan, is that going out?
Maybe not. Maybe that's an idea, because I didn't think of that because I'm on the planning board in Freedom, so I just tell them.
I mean, our planning board is has some folks who are very concerned about the the United Nations influence and
the only way that
domination of
the only way we can dispel that is through just continual update of what actually is taking place. And so I think press releases are very good.
Yes.
And using the power of your group mailings upstairs is a great way.
Okay.
Now, how is this for workload for you? Because I know you people. This is a big project.
Well, I think public relations and public information is an important component, that people know what's happening, and we're advisory. We're making recommendations. The communities can take them. Right. So we're not.
Okay. Well, if you need some help, give me an SOS. Okay.
I agree with the press release as well, because I think community leaders, as well as people who are concerned about community issues, read the paper, and that's where they go to get their information. It's not necessarily going to reach 80% of those people who are not paying attention. But those that want to know, they go to the paper. It's their first source, I think.
Jerry, could you do me a favor and have a check on the newspapers and just make sure that one gets up to the
Conway Sun?
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
We know when they're going out, and what's in them, we can keep an eye on our local periodicals to make sure that they're covering where they know that that's something we're interested in seeing in our paper, our local paper.
No, I think that's a very good idea, and it's a good idea to send it to the planning boards, because many of them are beginning to look at their own updates of their master plans, and it's a good opportunity to know what's going on here.
Okay.
Sir, any more?
That's it.
That's it.
I think there's a good discussion about public information. I think that's something that we need to do more of.
Right. The housing plan.
Okay, I just want to give a brief overview of the housing plan. Under the statutes, the regional planning commissions are required to prepare a housing needs assessment every 5 years. And Lakes Region did it in 2004, 2010. So this is less than the 5 years, but it's a component of the Granite State future. And one new element in the housing plan that was not included in others was a fair housing and equitable planning effort. And that's something we haven't done before, but that's something that we've included in this document. So I'm just going to go through this quickly. We have a chapter, introduction, and we talk about definitions. I think definitions are important because I think people kind of get confused over affordable housing, workforce housing, Section 8. Basically, affordable housing would be that type of housing where people should only be paying 30% of their income for housing. And Section 8 is really geared towards very, very low income people, people that might be making 150% of the poverty level, which might be around $30,000 for a family of 2 or 3. Workforce housing, on the other hand, refers to people that are working as municipal employees, teachers, entry-level professionals, etc., that just maybe not be able to afford a rental at the rate of $1,000 a month or buy a home. So that's a different kind of a situation for both of those people. And then we have a description of the areas, the region and the area of analysis. We talk about the region. We have a format that is consistent with what National Regional Planning Commission and all the other planning commissions are doing, so we're kind of following that. We have information on socioeconomic data. One thing you've heard before, I'd like to mention again, is the population of the region only grew by about 5.9% in the year from 2000 to 2010. This is on page 10. So it was a dramatic drop-off from the previous years when it was like 15% and 20%. And the projections that the Office of Energy and Planning have given, which is, that information just became available on Friday, calls for very slow growth in the Lakes region and throughout the state for the next 40 years. You know, maybe 1% per year at the most. In some cases, it might be 0.3% for certain counties. I think Belknap County is only supposed to grow by 0.3% up until the year 2040. So that's going to be reflected in this. We just got that information.
Can I just, or the other thing is it's also in towns, it's a negative growth, because that's what they're saying about Freedom, that will be a negative vote in the future. And this is a real concern, because why? What is the impact upon the schools, and what is the impact upon the community? So that it's a really important thing, I think, to keep the information going to the towns about what we're doing here,
Right.
that they can see this and understand this.
And flat school enrollment, or even a decline, has been a trend that started 10 years ago, and it's projected to continue in the future. And you're seeing school districts closing schools.
Right, exactly.
To your point about definitions,
Yes.
I'd suggest that you do a PR piece for the newspapers, just explaining very succinctly, just as you did, because there's a great deal of hysterical focus on affordable. Oh my God, affordable. And with the thoughts that everybody's going to invade their towns and communities and want subsidized and want municipally provided housing, where affordable really means, just as you described it, it's for the normal individual or family that's earning normal wages here in the Lakes region, having the opportunity to buy privately housing that's their budget. They can only devote a third of their budget to.
Yeah.
And there's a hysteria about this. And a lot of it is some of these words just aren't understood.
Right, right. I mean, people think that Section 8 housing is, everybody's on Section 8 housing, it has any kind of assistance, but it's a limited amount, and there's a waiting list, and these people are at very, very low incomes.
And it's counter to the needs that every study is indicating, that we need to retain our middle class, we need to retain our families, and we need to provide economic opportunities for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that they can survive is if they can have adequate housing. And all Affordable to the Communities is doing is saying to each town, get your regulations so that you're not preventing private development.
Right.
And it's tremendously misunderstood, and it's being spun for political reasons. So I think your point is extremely important. And again, I think that the people that live in this region can understand it and will get by all this political garbage.
The selectmen's meeting that I was at on Monday night, in Freedom, the cry was made by the school. They were there, which was why I had gone to hear, but they were talking about the drop, the decreasing right now during the school year of students who are going to other places, other schools. And they were saying, is this a fault of the school system, or do we need to to investigate that? And one of the selectmen said, no, it's the fact that we don't have affordable housing. And I thought that was really intriguing that it was coming from him saying that, because it makes such a difference. He's a person who's been on the board for many years, and said he's well respected for his thoughts. And it's interesting that they're there, that he's there.
It's a new book that came out recently called Snob Zones by Lrpc. And Lisa used to write for the New Hampshire Business Review, and she looked at various towns and their regulations in terms of large lot zoning, and basically she comes to the conclusion that many towns throughout the country prevent workforce housing or affordable housing because of their regulatory process. And she cites Ossipee in particular. We're kind of familiar with that case. So.
Could you just say the name again?
It's called Snob Zones, and I have a copy of this, and you can order it off of Amazon.com for $17.81 or Kindle. And we're going to buy a couple books here.
Yeah, and what is her name?
Lrpc, Prevot. But I have this, and I'll circulate around. Just moving quickly through the housing chapter, we look at population distribution. Back in the 90s, we had a lot of people who were in the middle ages, say 25 to 50, and now you can just see how that shift has gone to older ages, older age groups. On page 13, figure 3.4, we talk about the the average household size, and it was like 2.9 in Alexandria to 1.9 persons in Freedom. That's the average household size. So you can see how this decline has occurred. And probably in the Lakes region, it's about 2.5. Unemployment rates in the Lakes region have basically paralleled what the state unemployment rate is. In the year 2012, the Lakes region was 5.2. This is page 14. And the state's was 5.5. Percent of population 65 and over, you know, this is a demographic that is of concern. The Lakes region average is about 17.5. 17.5% of all the population is 65 and over, and that's projected to increase to maybe 25 or 30 by the year 2020, 2030. Wolfboro, Hebron, and Freedom have the largest percent, well over 25% of their population, which is probably intuitive, where Barnstead, Hill, and Northfield have lower persons, 65 and over.
Those statistics include both the current population that's aging in place and the influx.
Well, this is 2010 data, U.S. Census data, so.
Total
population.
Not an objection.
Would that be useful to put on the caption that it's 2010? Most of them, you do have the dates on them.
Yeah, right. I'll put that on.
Is there any statistic that shows with the influx of 65 and older as to the level of housing that they're acquiring? Because if you're moving into the state, you have to require housing.
Right.
And it would be interesting as to what category those people are moving into.
Yeah.
You mean category as far as cost of house?
Yeah, because a lot of it, are they down in the Section 8 category, are they in the affordable, or where are they in terms of what they're acquiring?
I think this is intuitive. I think most people 65 and over who come here to retire are probably middle-income people and above. And they're probably buying higher housing.
That's what I'm thinking also.
Yeah, that's intuitive. But the reason this is important is the future housing needs will be smaller units for, you know, one person or two persons. And families that have their house right now, the trend is to age in place, where if they have the house when the kids were there, they're going to want to probably stay there, in some cases, as they age. Some people, the baby boomers who are like 65 and over, they may want to sell their house. They bought it at a high price, and are there going to be new people coming in to buy it at that high price, or they're going to have to sell it at a loss? Because some of those people want to downsize if they go to a smaller unit. So,
You know, I agree with you intuitively. I was just wondering if there was any statistics to
yeah.
You could probably pick it off, could you pick off the numbers and the,
Yeah, I'll try to look into that.
yeah.
Because so many fear this influx of older people into the state, and if they're older and they come with money to acquire housing and to be able to support themselves and contribute to the community, I say it's not a bad thing at all.
No, I think it's a good thing, right. But the basic population that has grown up here and lived here, that's the one that's graying. And there just aren't a lot of young people coming in to take their place. So, back in the old days, we used to call it the mailbox economy, where people would come here and they didn't have very little impact on services, but they brought their resources and spent their money here. So that was good.
That's a new word, I've heard that.
We also looked at the non-white population, which intuitively is very low here in the Lakes region. I think the population is like under 4%. Laconia and, strangely enough, Alexandria have the largest population of non-white people. And then places like Bridgewater, Danbury, and Freedom have very low levels, 2% or under. We also looked at single-parent households, households run by single parents, number of households with no vehicles, the percentage of persons below the poverty level. The communities that have the highest level of people below the poverty level will be Tilton, Franklin, Tamworth, and Ashland. I'm going to skip over some of these. We also have a discussion on various groups that have housing needs, like persons with disability, low-income persons, refugees, veterans, homeless population. Right now there's one homeless shelter in Laconia. They're thinking about having a second one because there is a demand. It's almost at 100% occupancy almost every day. The average is 96, but many times at 100%. But on page 23, Gary helped me with this chart, and we put together what we call economic and diversity characteristics, where we looked at non-white population, percent of households with no vehicle, population 75 and over, percent of parents, single-family household, the percent of persons below the poverty. So we came up with an index factor, and we identified communities that show high levels or exceed the threshold for the weighted regional average. For the non-white population, it's like 3.2%. Persons without vehicles, it's 1.67. Population over 75 is 80%. And percent of single family, or percent of single parent households is 9.5. And percent of population below poverty throughout the region is 9.6%. But Laconia had the highest because Laconia exceeded the threshold in all 5 of these categories, followed by Bristol and then Ashland, Ossipee, and Tilton. So those are the communities that have the highest indicators of economic and diversity issues. I'm going to move on to page 25 where we look at residential permits. I find this very interesting. Back in the 90s, the Lakes region, throughout the whole 90s, we were producing about 600 units of new housing every year. And then it spiked up to around 1,200 for 2002 through 2006. Then after that, there was a sharp decline to 2009, where we're only producing about 200 single-family resident building permits throughout the region. So that decline has been significant. It's like 1/3 of what was produced in housing back in the 90s. Most of the housing, a great majority, 85%, is single-family, followed by multifamily. Page 27, table 3.5, looks at the median family income and for various counties, and it's weighted to about $69,000, $69,700. So that is what half the people make less than that, half of the people make more than that in the Lakes region. So that would be considered the threshold in terms of workforce housing. At a person making around $69,700, they should be paying about 1/3 of their income, which might be, let's see what that would be, about $20,000 a year for housing, including heat, rent, principal, interest, taxes. And in some cases, that is, you can probably be more affordable to buy a house than actually rent an apartment, because the price of housing with mortgage rates have gone down, the price of rent has gone up.
Before you go too far on that, on page 26, you have this housing types permitted.
Yes.
What has happened to the multifamily that it's had such a terrific decrease?
Well, I think maybe there should, I guess that's the point, there should be more multifamily being built. For whatever reason it isn't being built, part of it could be communities don't zone or don't allow for multifamily, and that could be a part of the issue. Anybody else has a comment?
The other thing to note on that is that it's a percentage. It's not numbers. Yeah.
Right.
So that everybody won't be depressed, Laconia is experiencing a approval boom on commercial and rental properties. We have major projects of multi-unit facilities going up that will be both for rental and for condominium use.
Yeah.
And there's a major one on the Weirs Boulevard that's under in the planning process. So now there's a big difference between what gets approved and what actually gets built and sold.
Yeah,
a
right.
big gap in there, but it's very encouraging to know that private, and these are all private developers, are causing a lot of interest.
Would you call some of this housing workforce housing or affordable
Yes,
housing?
we have two major
Yeah.
projects that are
Okay.
workforce, and then the what has been realized, the properties, the single families or the cluster developments that are selling are in the 200 range.
Mm-hmm.
When you get above 3, you start hitting an issue in Laconia that the income can't support that.
Right.
And you get above that, and then you definitely get to that they're second homeowners of Boston or southern New Hampshire.
Yeah. And this housing is for year-round residents, permanent residents.
Yes, it is,
Yeah.
yes. But it's very intriguing to realize the potential that does exist. And you wonder also, many of you'd like to say to a developer, haven't you talked with the other people? That the market can only accommodate so many housing units.
Mm-hmm.
And as they build them, the same thing will happen, supply and demand. Supply will outstrip demand, and then it will slow down the approval cycle.
Yeah. This table 3.6 is like housing prices in the Lakes region. Back in the early 2000s, prices might be around $143,000. They rose to $215,000 around 2007, and then they began to decline to $165,000 in 2011 and 2012. But in the first half of 2013, they've gone up to $170,000. That's the all prices median purchase price.
Where are you?
I'm on page 28, table 3.6. And then on table 30, or page 30, table 3.7, which is rental, the median gross rent, it was around, say, $600 back in the early 2000s, and then it shot up. It's continually gone up to where it's $920, page 30, today in the year 2013. So rents have not declined like the way single-family homes have. On page 31, I mentioned earlier that we're waiting for information from the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority on their housing production. They have, table 3.8 is a statewide average of what new housing is needed. And they're saying a total projection of new housing based on population model is around 3,500 for single-family home ownership. And then for rental units, it's around 500. So these are statewide figures, and they're going to break this down and try to give us more detailed information for the Lakes region. On page 32, we have this discussion about affordable and equitable housing opportunities and barriers, and I'm going to summarize that quickly because I'm way over my time. We looked at different complaints that may have been lodged with the New Hampshire Legal Assistance, New Hampshire Commission on Human Resources, and HUD Fair Housing regarding discrimination. And we found basically very, very little complaints that were issued in the region. A lot of these were resolved. On page 39, there's a legal assistance information. There may have been 16 cases. Mostly dealt with disability, some with family type issues, and maybe a few with race. HUD had a total of maybe 6 cases. Again, family, disability, 1 race, and then all these cases were either found to have no cause or conciliated. What I'd like to do is maybe have a brief discussion on housing recommendations, and we can do that now or maybe move on to transportation to stick with the agenda, but some of the housing recommendations that I'm thinking about would be there is a need for more rental units and home ownership units to support economic development. We should encourage communities to review their local land use regulations to make sure that they encourage housing for workforce housing, and perhaps identify successful workforce housing developments. I thought our workshop on housing was good, where we had people talk about Harriman Hill and Wolfboro, Pinecrest and Meredith, also the Ossipee Village Apartments over in Ossipee. So what could be done? And then encourage communities to look at their zoning and to just consider workforce housing zoning amendments. So I have these housing recommendations, which I'd like to maybe give around to you, and maybe you could write something down after the meeting and give it back to me.
Okay, I think that might be a good idea because we are running late in the meeting, but also as this is such a large chapter, and it would be nice to have more time to have a look at the chapter for you all and then answer these things.
Are these interim reports being distributed to the planning directors of our communities for their input for you?
I have not done that yet, but I plan to. The planning director in Laconia and the planning director in Franklin are members of this committee, and they have received a copy of it, but the other planning people have not received a copy of it.
Just thinking they have enormous ability and interest, and could provide really good input.
Good idea, yeah.
John Edgar here is very, very good.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other comments on housing? I mean, housing, I think, could be the most complicated and involved chapter that we're going to do in the Lake Regional Plan. And
When you finish, when this comes in for the next review, are you going to take all of these pages of things, of data that we've looked at, and bring this all into one kind of summary of what all these things, these figures are saying to you?
yes, right. At the beginning of the chapter, I think I had something like executive summary, and it's blank right now, but I want to do a 2-page summary of these.
So please, yeah, because that would be fascinating, I think, to see a lot of this information, again, batted against each other statistically, and see what they're saying.
When the
What
Lake
you're interpreting from
when
it,
the Lakes Region Plan is completed, as when the other plans are completed at the other regions, we're going to have a statement on vision, priority projects, and telling the story. And we want to take this and write it in more readable English, so to speak. And then have all the technical planning components like housing, transportation, be like appendices. So people don't have to go through all this information, but they can get the guts of it by reading Telling the Story, where we can kind of put it in more readable format. But if they want to get into the detailed information, they can by going to the appendices.
In the grant, is there any funding reserved for, after these plans have been developed, for communications, speakers going out and presenting this information to the communities, or our regional host workshop?
Yeah, I mean,
I can get to that. After July, this is going to be sent down, as stated, to try to get them all compiled with the National Regional Planning Commission, and then they're going to come back, and they're all going to go through an approval process. And one of the goals here, one of the big messages that we're trying to convey through the Lake Regional Planning Advisory Committee, the Plan Advisory Committee, is that the committee members will essentially be spokespeople when this is presented to the commissioners for consideration for adoption. I mean, the goal of having you have a responsibility as a regional planning commission to develop a comprehensive regional plan, and this is it. Now, when this is all said and done, there have been ideas about putting together PowerPoints and putting together other talking points, and to have them packaged so that any RPC, any planning board, anybody interested could go out and have a highlight of what was in this particular regional plan, all the other RPCs, their respective regional plans. So there's thinking going on like that, and finding out what the cost of that would be and measuring it against available resources is a conversation that still needs to occur.
Because I think that will be very important, so that it's not politicized, that that there be spokespeople going out, and I'm not sure of the format, so that it can be presented to the communities in a way that they're not overwhelmed with the data,
yeah,
but that summarizes the major points and then provides them the real data for them to home in on in each community.
As Jerry was pointing out, there is a section for the plan that is supposed to be the synthesis of everything, and that report's supposed to be telling the story. That will tell the story about where we are, where we're headed. That ought to be very well written, and that ought to meet that test. This plan ought to meet that test of being able to convey that story when it gets to that point. And it's probably a very good idea for each of the technical components to have a brief executive summary that also tells the story for that, so when you get into it, you can understand that. So one of my hopes was, and I laid it out there months ago regarding this, the development of the plan, was to actually have this takeaway piece after all the planning is done that could be presented to planning boards, to the public, regarding what's really in this regional plan and how it can be used and be very helpful in the development of community master plans. I think that would be a real important
Right, very much agree.
legacy
Yep.
For this planning project.
Okay. All right. We now have transportation, but because it's 2 minutes to 10, we're going to have a 1-minute walkabout, all right?
That's a good idea. I like your walkabout. We need more walkabouts.
David?
Good morning.
How are you?
All right. I've been wondering if I'm going to go to the gas hearing today. I was wondering, I don't.
I'm pretty difficult. It's kind of frozen this morning.
This is this the one where they vote on it?
A little bit of hot coffee. That's
I
all.
mean, it's the second paragraph.
Yeah.
I don't think
I'm
there
not
is any.
positive of that.
Feels empty.
But it is
Oh,
the
that's
second
not, that's a
year,
little bit,
so
that's
that
only
would
small,
similar.
that one probably still has, it's probably enough anyway.
Yeah,
what's in here, though?
Two scheduled. I thought it was two.
They're just, this is the second, yeah, there are two scheduled.
It is called regular,
Oh,
so there is some.
there you go.
That would be great if you could be there.
Well, yeah, I would, well, speak to the Barnstead one and then also
They're very competent.
just individually for
It's a
the
nice
Yeah.
one. There's some chocolate ones
I
on
would
there.
guess
narrative.
You know, when I was in high school,
get it done.
I had a part-time job in the summer
I honestly believe in
at
it.
a donut place.
Because last night at our board meeting,
And I used to eat the donuts like
Like, that would be a terrible
every
place
once in
to
a
be.
while, once in a while a snack. Oh my God,
superintendent, he was
I was like 17 or
hearing that
something
the
like that.
White Oak
I didn't get fat,
Road
but
project, I mean, the
you know, it wasn't that
intersection
good.
project is
So
better.
many
No, they
donuts,
are.
you know,
It's not the best thing, no.
no. But they weren't little guys like
No, it's
here.
still viable.
You know, in Freedom, you have a population.
It's further out in time.
That one
That
child
hasn't been
policy like the Chinese
pushed back
said.
on the,
They're wising up.
They're wising up.
Yeah. And I tell all the
It's
people,
not as
okay,
close as Stockton.
give them a goal or a
right, yeah,
justification.
that's this year, but
And tell us.
That was
certainly the
Well, it's
best,
scary to talk to people because one of the real, you know,
virtually
really
all the other projects, I mean,
grew up with
it's what's being done
is,
You were at the workshop.
they're moving on.
Yes,
to Portland.
yeah, and I saw on that there's a chunk of money
Coming up to 6, I forgot the name of the dino school.
listed as, for the rest of 28.
Sad.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Because they're like,
And we put in,
you know,
a plug for North Farmstead Road.
Yes, well, that's
Was the
where,
next best priority for those
sitting there.
If anything would be done.
Soft.
The amount, portion that we've written so far, and Dan has done a bunch of research and just put some notes together, but it wasn't in a format to share. But I think that portion that we've shared so far, the automobile dependence and societal change, really is, yeah, and it's that part of the chapter that it's what people are talking about in terms of transportation needs, but it's one of those things
do
that's...
you people have copies of this transportation chapter?
Everybody have a copy?
Yeah, I printed it out offline because it's only a couple pages.
You do. Do you have it? Do you
Yes.
have it?
All right, great.
I just want to make sure that you've got something to, since you couldn't receive it in the email. Okay, sorry, Mike.
No, that's fine. I think that, like I was saying, that this section that we've written so far for your consideration really gets at what people are talking about. There's needs that are out there, but as a society, change needs to happen. How much the regional planning commissions can do to facilitate that change, I think it's worthy of pointing out what is needed if we really want to have a transit system or have walkable and bikeable communities. There's some other changes that need to take place for that to help facilitate that process. So I didn't know if you had any comments on what we've written to date. I also would point to the 3 maps
Yes,
that were
that's what,
prepared.
yes.
Dan has taken the suggestion from our initial meeting on the outline of expanding beyond the Lakes region to show some of the connectivity to points outside of our region. And we've worked to include the park and ride locations as well as some of the other opportunities for transit. As you know, we have 2 fixed or semi-fixed route systems in the Lakes region, systems that come through and provide connectivity outside the region as well.
Has there been work done on identifying potential park and ride locations?
Plenty, yes. Belmont there's a piece of land at the end of the Laconia bypass that's owned by the state. Belmont is considering, asking DOT for that being a possibility.
Is that in that triangle area?
It is.
That messed with 107, 106 getting into the business park?
This is actually at the end by the Belmont Town Beach, is my understanding.
Oh, on that end.
Yeah. So Route 3 corridor.
That's fascinating. And they are pursuing that?
They have an interest in that because there's an available piece of land. That's something that...
Are they networking in with Laconia?
That I'm not certain of, but Laconia participated. We recently completed our US Route 3 from Franklin to Laconia Transportation Demand Management study, and Laconia participated in that as well as Belmont, Franklin, and Tilton. So there was good discussion about what the possibilities are. Really, to advocate for park and rides wasn't a big portion of this. I think, we were looking at the possibility for the Green New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission connection, and we recently filled out our portion of the scope for that application to include a mapping exercise to see what really exists in the Lakes region and what those needs are.
Because this park and ride concept, especially in that area, as you know, downtown Laconia has parking issues. And a lot of the parking is assumed to be occupied by park and ride people. And so it blocks out spacing for customers. And just thinking about a park and ride facility that's convenient, close, and safe, those people could move there, and it would help that downtown process too. I'm going to follow up on that.
Oftentimes the funding for park and rides is through congestion mitigation and air quality, or CMAQ funding. And fortunately, in a lot of ways, we fall into an attainment area where the air quality doesn't warrant funding in this area, for CMAQ funding in this area.
Oh, I see.
Where the more urbanized portions of the state, Portsmouth, the seacoast in general, Nashua, Manchester, those areas are in non-attainment for air quality. The CMAQ funds are prioritized to help mitigate air quality issues and make improvements to facilitate some change. So oftentimes it's the CMAQ funding going to the urban area. Although at Exit 23 in New Hampton, we were successful a number of years ago in getting funding for a park and ride there.
Through that?
Through the CMAQ program.
Oh.
The real trick was to be able to show a positive contribution to air quality in a non-attainment area. So to get those funds, what had to be shown is the people that use that facility are going to Concord, for example, or going to Manchester.
Is that land at that intersection owned by the state, or is it owned by the Belmont?
My understanding is owned by the state.
Oh, excellent.
Are towns able to establish their own local town parking lot?
Sure, and that's, Belmont's a good example of that on Route 106. The big sign at that park and ride facility that kind of goes hand in hand with the comment you had about the challenges in Laconia. It says for Belmont residents. And I don't know who polices that or...
Yeah, I thought I saw that. Then I had asked somebody, can anyone use it? And I was told yes, but that sign is scary.
It is. The same type of sign at the Belmont Town Beach, and I asked, when when I was a resident of Laconia, that, do I have access? And I said, sure. But the sign makes you believe otherwise.
I can tell you that Eatontown Beach does not feel the same way. You don't use that. I just want to ask you a couple of questions
Sure.
about this map, if I could. The one on page 6, the Lifeline one.
Yes.
For the eastern part of us, I think it might be helpful if it went up to North Conway,
Okay.
because that's where the hospital is. And the service is really used a lot by that eastern corridor on 16.
Okay.
And on the south part, when you get to Rochester,
Yes.
the sort of park and ride for us is down in Dover. For us on the east side, because we go to Dover to the bus to go to Boston. Which is probably just about at the bottom of this map, really. Where, you know, equivalent with Concord and Epsom.
Okay.
Because the corridor really is, it very seldom is a cross, because the cross roads are not great enough to save you any time. Even though it might be longer to go down 16, it still does mean that you get there faster. This park and ride, I had the same question about really that you were just talking about this. It's a, C&J Transport, but they have a parking lot, but they restrict the amount of time you can stay there, which therefore said to me that it must be private. Can the state do anything about making them be open all the time, or is it just one of those things that they can dictate the bus company must own this parking lot? Or
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but it seems to me it's a matter of where the funding came from and how the park and ride location was built. That would dictate.
Yeah. And the last one I had was just a comment. If it were possible, and it may not be possible physically to actually see it, or technically, to have a few mountains in there, because that really sort of dictates why, you know, the lifeline for the east is really to the north and south, because of the...
Yeah, we really, this is, again, the map on page 6.
Yes.
We worked hard to limit the amount of color that was needed to show the lifelines. That may be a great opportunity to put some relief in there and show the contours. That would be helpful. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And the other thing is train tracks. Is there any, you know, this is what, a 5-year plan, it might be not a bad thing to put in.
Right, right.
But even if it's for where the rights of ways are, so that if this funding was applied and these routes became usable.
Our thought is, because of the clutter, is to show that on a separate map. And along with the rail corridors, you know, there's been a lot of activity to build in the abandoned corridors for walking trails. And maybe those two combined.
Right,
because
that's
they are
a very good
related.
idea, to be a separate map. Yes, right. A lot of excitement in the Conways, and it may be that this is just way out of your line, but a lot of excitement on this walk that they're talking about putting into the rail lines that is going from Conway down south, going over to Freiburg and going around to that area. But it's going, I gather, open up a huge area. And this is not something I know a lot about, but it might be worth seeing, because it could be just an added extension onto the map that you make rather than just saying it. But I gather it's going to have a lot of money put into it. Do you know this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm not familiar with the project.
You mean for a trail?
Yes.
Walking trail?
The walking trail and the bicycling trail that they're talking about.
And the tracks and everything is still in place there.
That's correct. That's correct.
So is it going to be right adjacent to the
Yep,
rail tracks?
Yep. Yeah, because my sister was saying the same thing you're saying. I thought that's what we were going to use for bicycles, you know. But, yeah, let me see if I can still dig the newspaper out of the pile of papers for the wood stove and see, because it was in the Conway paper that they talked about this.
Okay.
Maybe I can bring it up on Any more? You have more to say, I'm sure.
Yes, I do. You know, part of the diversion from chapter development really was the workshop, the preparation for the workshop. And we had a lot of dialogue, both internally with the TAC, with this group, and others about, given that the public is engaged in the transportation decision-making process, how much of an effort do we need for a workshop for transportation? And ultimately, as you know, it was decided that we would put a workshop together, and that the idea for the workshop, get the practitioners to the table and provide further guidance on the chapter development process.
There is a place on the agenda to talk about this, but I think we could talk about this just now.
Okay, well, and that's the other sheet that I handed out.
Yes.
Which is 2 sides.
Right.
And we've just posted this information along with 4 of the presentations from the workshop on the Lrpc website. But this 2-page is a bulleted list of the points that were made at the workshop on Friday.
Which was very good for those of you who were not there. There was nobody there. It really, it was excellent, enjoyable. You learned, or at least I learned from it.
I thought it gave breadth to the topic area.
Right.
A lot of thought and differing people working on the same thing. There's a lot of linkages there.
Right.
And sometimes if you look carefully, it seems like it's not very organized or coordinated, but I think those efforts really are. And it's a good group of people in the field doing the work to make improvements in the system overall.
You have about 40-some people.
Yeah, we
I
did.
think so.
Yeah.
It was a good turnout. Mike did a good job.
Yeah, it was a very good turnout.
Was there any new information shared or presented that?
Well, my first pass, and I haven't had much of a chance to digest this. We just compiled the results yesterday and posted them on the website. But my first pass was, many of the comments, not surprisingly, are related to funding. And I think the second category is in the realm of education and information. And I think that's particularly true when you talk about other opportunities than automobile travel, is that there's a need for good information and education about what exists today and a better understanding about what some of the needs are. And then beyond that, I think there were good comments in the answer to the question of how Lrpc can help facilitate a better transportation system. And they were a little bit more scattered, but certainly funding came up in terms of us, the Planning Commission, the staff, and I would assume the Association of Regional Planning Commissions, being advocates for what the needs are in the region and showing that there's a lack of funding to meet those needs. That, we said, was going to be a focal point of our chapter as well. And to me, that's fairly easy to articulate. We've gone through the transportation improvement update process. We have a list of the projects, and they're categorized in terms of primary, secondary, and tertiary projects that we would like to see when funding becomes available. And we know what those costs are. We know what the DOT has available, and we also know where DOT's focus is. To me, the significant disconnect with one of the focal areas is keeping the good roads good. From a road surface management system perspective, there's a lot of money that can be saved if you are able to maintain roads before they fall in a state of disrepair. But at the same time, some of the secondary routes in the Lakes region really have fallen into a state of disrepair. We need to bring them up to good standards and then keep them good. And so we're falling a little bit behind with some of those routes, if the priority is keep the good good.
It's interesting to me that in Freedom we have a real disconnect between the ability of the roads agent, I guess he's called roads agent, to know precisely all this, and I'm certain all of this knowledge comes from his attendance at these staff meetings, and is always saying to the townspeople at town meetings or at selectmen's meetings that, you know, we need to keep the proper base that we've got, and it's an investment to keep it up every year and to not let it go. And this is certainly true of the town's roads, but it's the non-numbered state roads that aren't kept up by anybody and aren't maintained by the town. Or there's nothing there anymore for the town to maintain. And I think that they just, to me, there needs to be some kind of education or knowledge spread to let the townspeople know about this fact that you can prepare town roads in a way that state roads in a way that they can be taken over by the towns. If there's a 50 or a 25% input or something. But that's what isn't known. I don't even know it when I'm talking about it. And maybe that's something that you could talk about in this.
Yeah, and that seems to be a model that DOT has gravitated toward when they bring a road up to a standard.
Yes.
For the town to take it over. I mean, the long-term
Yes.
maintenance of that route, there's some mutual benefits there. There's also some reluctance on
Yes.
behalf of the communities
Exactly.
to accept that responsibility.
That's exactly right, but then they know where the blame lies, you know, and that's the thing that I think at the moment is in the wrong place.
There are a couple of takeaway points that have hit me a couple times here, and one is that of our roads and bridges in the state of New Hampshire, half of them are owned by the state. And all the discussion is about DOT, that half. But the other half's owned by all the local municipalities. And the local municipalities are faced with those same cost issues of asphalt skyrocketing and the demands within the communities for their property tax funding. And just a realization that, and part of this chapter and our continued focus should be on that you know, everything isn't free, and that municipalities have a obligation to maintain their structure because we're all interconnected. And what happens in Guilford directly affects Laconia. We're all interconnected to our roads. The other thing that hit me out of this workshop, and I've probably heard it before, but DOT, with all the discussion about their funding and condition of roads, that 40% of their funding goes to snow removal and sanding, you know, just winter maintenance. 40%. That's huge.
I never thought it was that large myself. That was impressive.
Because I always like to be on the offense, you know, repairing, fixing, building, and snow removal is critical to our economy, and you must do it, but 40% of their total budget goes for that? God, that's scary.
That shows how little is actually going to the other end.
Yes, that's exactly it, they only have 60%.
Yeah,
I wonder what that percentage was like back before there was a black roads policy.
I don't know. But just today looking at it, you know, it just scares the bejesus out of me that it's that high. Because there's less money to be allocated to other things.
Black surface. Black roads policy is the desire to get the roads, when there's snow down, to get it out, to make them clean as opposed to...
Before the next snowstorm comes.
Yeah.
Ah, that's when they pile it up, they push it.
Well, we have an expectation that all the roads are going to be travelable at high speeds on a quick basis.
It wasn't always that way in the 70s. Sometimes roads would get iced up, and they might be iced up for a week or two or three. And these would be state roads.
Back when we owned tire chains.
Yes, exactly. That's why you don't need them anymore. Yeah. So that's what this double snow plowing is about. When you plow first with the storm and then
Well, salt, too.
2 days later you push it all back 10 feet or something so that you're ready for the next storm.
Right.
But that was new to me. Huh?
That's not done up in Maine?
No,
Yeah.
not one with the small towns, no.
I think in our communications, we need to grab a hold of some of these very basic points, and in the executive summary sections, you know, highlight them so that they can be hit you in the face.
Well, that might be something to put in there, to just to question the black roads policy. I mean, to raise the issue with DOT or the public. I mean, I'm thinking of, you know, we get the state, the federal money, the gas tax money, and we get whatever the pile is, but 40% of that is going to snow plowing, and in Mississippi or something, they're getting the same pile of money, but that can go into, that 40% can go for maintaining the roads, ditching, paving.
I'd just say, add that the increased acceptance of telecommuting would be key in a change in a black roads policy, that people aren't expected to be at work necessarily that morning at 8 o'clock, just to expand on that. I think there's a social change that has to take place in order for that policy to change. And you mentioned chains on your tires, another interesting little factor. If you look at the salt use, and then the spike in salt use seems to correlate with sort of the advent of the all-season tire, and all of a sudden people weren't expecting to have to change to snow tires in the winter, and their expectation was that they weren't going to slide all over the road, and the DOTs were all of a sudden called upon to put down more salt.
Interesting, yes.
And for the towns, that's an expense of buying salt, and then we just build a salt shed. That was a major expense.
And then we have contaminated groundwater, but that's another.
Well, it shouldn't be. Of course, it had to be paved where the salt is kept.
No, but I'm saying the application, the salt on the roads is making its way into aquifers. Salt
Right,
is applied to the
adjacent
roads.
wells that are drilled near the roads.
Yeah, we have lots of problems for you.
I thought, something I just learned earlier from Jerry's presentation, he had the graph on the percentage of households with no vehicles available. And I'd never really thought of that, and I'm seeing in Barnstead, it's about better part of 2%. I don't know who those people are, but how can they live?
Right.
And, it'd be interesting to find out to locate some of these people and see what they're doing to survive. How do they get their food? And I don't see how they can work in a place like Barnstead. There's very little.
We have another a number that's approaches that in a little bit different way. Is 25% of people in New Hampshire don't have vehicles. And
People or households?
well, and that's the question. I mean, is this for, you know, the populace regardless of age? Is it for households? Is it so there's different ways to look at that. I know we've used that statistic in the past and it's, you know, raised some questions about could that even be possible? But we're exploring that a little bit further. You're right, David. I think it would be good to know, you know, how people do in an area. I thought it was interesting that the point that Nick Coates made in his presentation at the workshop. He was talking about the younger generation having a desire to not own automobiles. And, you know, how does New Hampshire fit into that structure, or are they really gravitating by design to areas such as Seattle or New York or more metropolitan areas where they do have alternative system in place that they can use to get around. As 25% of your income approximately goes for transportation costs, that's a big savings potentially. I mean, you still have to, pay for another means, possibly the subway or the bus, or I don't think we can walk everywhere.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I hadn't really thought it through like that, but I have one daughter who lives in London and who barely uses a car, only has one for getting out. And one daughter who lives in Dallas. And that would be a marvelous question to ask them and just see, I mean, how much of each one of their income is spent on transportation. I'll do that. Come back and give you some data. Any more, sir?
No, just in terms of timeline, I believe our next TAC meeting is the first Wednesday in January is January 1st, so it would be January 8th. Our goal was to have a draft for the TAC to be able to look at. I think it's important for them to be engaged in the chapter development process as well as this committee.
You're saying the TAC meeting is on the 8th?
Transportation Advisory Committee.
Yes.
First Wednesday of the month.
Is that here as well? Oh.
Yes. So our goal is to, present the draft chapter to them in whatever format.
Can you send out a notice to all of us just to
Absolutely.
remind us all that that's happening? Because it's something I've been meaning to go to. And just like to make it.
It would be good to have you there.
Yeah, you got it.
So the TAC looks at all forms of transportation, road, public, transit,
Absolutely.
air.
The air is interesting. Is there a possibility of looking at that little airport? Where is it on Route 25 that I go by? Is that Molten Borough would be?
It is, yeah, Molten Borough.
That's a private airport.
Is that all private?
Yeah.
No, nothing public at all.
All right.
Right.
Well, the
You're
airports
all
have separate funding
Right.
sources, I see, anyway.
They do.
In the 10-year plan, there's some pretty handsome figures going to state airports. Especially I see Concord getting more money for taxiways and runway improvements, but and it's federal money, so it's free, but it's...
It's part of a trust fund, it's airport trust fund that the,
Right.
it's a loser type fee.
In the scheme of things, I drive by that occasionally. I see the planes there, some of them tied, small ones tied down for months, and then occasionally the corporate jets. And of course, NASCAR weeks are big weeks, but
Yeah.
they could very easily, well, they fly in there and then helicopter to the Loudon track. They could just as easily fly into the Mammoth Peas or the Manchester, where the commercial flights have been declining,
Yeah.
and it's just a shame that we, or at least I think that some of this air money couldn't go for other uses. Because it never will, and there are certainly interests that want to keep the small airports going.
That was another, I think, general theme from the workshop the other day is that there are really restrictions based on where the funds come from, what they can be used for. And airports is one of those streams that's dedicated to air. It's not that we could divert those funds and improve our roadways.
I'm sure it's from the tax on aviation fuel or something, so it's reasonable that it goes to the airports.
Okay, we now have the chapter outlines. One is on water, infrastructure, and resource. One is on natural hazards and climate change, and the third is on energy efficiency and green building. And these are going to be talked about in order to have the work done within the chapter for our next meeting.
Are there more copies available of those?
And I'd just like to make sure that they have these papers.
I have some copies. I'm going to be doing water infrastructure and energy efficiency. Dave's going to be doing the natural
Well, I think we have
resources.
a
What
couple
do
of
you-
copies.
Did you get this?
I didn't pick up any of those three, the small ones.
Okay, let me make a, Steve, you didn't get a copy
Okay,
of this.
water.
Did you?
So I'm gonna start with water. Does anyone
Okay,
need that?
let me go upstairs
Thank
and
you
I'll
very
make a
much.
few copies and I'll bring right back to you.
Do you have water? There's water.
You ain't- Do any more copies?
Okay, you've got natural hazards still to come, okay? Just so you know.
Okay.
Okay, and I think they're doing something, they've all disappeared at a rapid rate.
You have everything?
You mentioned water.
I know.
Do you have everything?
I do, thank
Okay,
you.
all right.
Thanks for asking.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the water infrastructure chapter. But first I wanna talk about some of the workshops that I'm looking at. I'm the lead author on the environment chapter. We looked at that outline last time. The water infrastructure chapter and the energy efficiency and green building chapter. Now, I think hopefully we all agree that there's sort of an environmental, natural resources side to all three of those. So I'd like to entertain the idea of having one workshop that tackles all three of those concepts.
What is the third one?
There's water infrastructure, energy efficiency and green building, which we'll look at today, and then there's the environment chapter that we went over last time. Yeah, that you guys gave me a lot of feedback on.
Right.
Yeah. I think it would be late January that we target to do something like that. It would be a similar format to the workshops we've done so far, but we do maybe a little bit more breakout work and have maybe with the 3 chapters, maybe 3 stations, but have 2 breakout sessions so that any one attendee chimes in on 2 of the 3 chapters.
That's interesting.
All right.
So we might go for an hour for all 3 and then break, and then people could go to different ones in the second hour. Is that your thought?
Yeah, maybe not 2 hours, but 2
45
sessions,
minutes.
right, 2 45-minute sessions.
And they can choose?
Yes, right.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on, I guess, who registered. It might be nice to try and assign people to get the experts on topics chiming in, but chances are they're going to choose. I don't know. Do you have a preference?
I don't know, this last one of just taking sections of the room and doing it, I think was very effective because there was a mix of characters in the thing. Which is probably more important because everybody has their hot buttons, the things that they're really interested in.
Right.
And sometimes, because I'm interested in water, doesn't mean that I shouldn't participate in one of these other things.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think, considering all, I think just assigning, okay, this is Group A, Group B, Group C,
Okay.
and first you're going to be talking about this, and second you're going to be talking about something else,
All right.
is a good way.
Okay. All right.
But you could change if you wanted to, right?
Well, I mean, I think once we see the number of attendees and who's signing up, it may guide us kind of on how we want to.
Because you could have everybody gravitate just towards their particular hot button, and it could be the composition of the room all goes to this, and Dave has nobody at his.
Yeah.
You know, but if you.
So I think one of us would have to intercede and take people from one and do some reassignment.
Yeah.
Yeah, try that.
And the other thing is, we don't. Do I really want to be in the position of sort of setting it up? And maybe that's a bad idea that I'm kind of orchestrating the thing. Maybe it should be random or.
Got a natural selection of
right,
where you sit.
Yeah.
I thought the way it was done and the shortness of it kept everybody on task, on focus.
Okay.
And it produced the results desired too.
Yeah. Right.
So maybe emulate that model.
Yeah. Okay.
But having one workshop to cover these 3 topics, environment, water, and energy, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
All right.
especially if you have sandwiches there.
I agree. I say the sandwiches and the cookies are pretty much 90% of the.
We would like to mix it up and maybe have a evening session at some times, but these workshops have been successful and people seem to like them, so.
Certainly, you learn a lot.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
This last one though, the people that attended, there were many that are employed by municipalities and state
Right.
agencies, and they can schedule their time accordingly.
Right.
Those that are employed in the private sector would have difficulties breaking away.
Yeah.
So I think you're thinking about an evening thing is pretty neat. Or maybe starting it at 4 or something like that.
Yeah.
That even in the commercial sector, you could break away, or if you're in education or healthcare, you could break away from those things.
Yeah.
I think doing that that's something worth thinking about.
As one of the long-distance drivers of the group, I would suggest you start thinking about evening ones in April and May, not in January.
Yeah, right. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Although I would prefer the daytime, because as a municipal official, every evening is filled up with meetings.
True.
That's, at the local level, that's when all the meetings are, is evenings, nights.
In our experiences, people tend to like a Friday, late morning, afternoon session. We seem to, we have been successful with the turnout so far.
Well, do it again then.
Okay.
All right.
But we would like to have an evening meeting.
Yes, I think
But
it would
this-
be good to have a
this
meeting,
one I
but
think-
wait for better weather. and
Yeah,
that one.
this one will stick
Yeah.
with the format that was, you know,
And we'll have a snow date in case we have snow.
Right.
And
Right.
on the business of the evening one, we could have it later on, you know, in the year, and have it be, as we move along on a subject that we think we really do particularly need to have a second one,
Yeah.
or maybe pull one of these out and do it separately. If it isn't enough, we could do that.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
all right, so I'll go into the water infrastructure outline now. It's set up in large part the way I set up the environment outline. One difference is that there's not that second list of topics, because I think on this there are some important topics that need to be addressed. And those you'll see on the second page under number 3. The topics are wastewater, stormwater, and drinking water in terms of the actual stuff, the water in its different states. But then talk of water resources in more their natural state as surface water and groundwater, and then protection strategies. And then the framework for discussing those is again the same as what it was in the environment chapter. To take each of those topics, go through the background, go through the current conditions and trends, and then look at opportunities. But I'd like to go back to the front again, and this very first element in the introduction, define water infrastructure. And I think that gets at the crux of a lot of what this chapter is about. I think the easy answer, you say a wastewater treatment plant. Yeah, that's water infrastructure, definitely. But what about 100 acres of forest somewhere in the watershed? Is that water infrastructure? And I think, you know, the answer to me is yes. It's providing maybe a more valuable service than that wastewater treatment plant. But in a lot of ways, it's doing the very same thing. It's ensuring our supply of clean water. And again, I think that sort of gets at what this chapter is hopefully going to focus on. I mean, I don't really need to go much further into it, other than maybe to go back to the second page and say, you know, after we talk about those general topics, we'll of course have the summary of findings, the conclusions, the goals and objectives, and then the recommendation, the part that really matters.
If I could just chime in, I've heard anecdotally that the quality of the water has declined in the waste region. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but people have told me that. It could be because wastewater treatments are getting older and not being able to keep up. Am I correct or incorrect?
I think John answered it really well at the last meeting. He said, it depends on how you look at it. When you look at what we've gone through over the past, he cited sort of the past 3 or 4 decades and said that in terms of solid waste being pumped directly into Winnipesaukee, water quality's improved, but issues of sediment and maybe phosphorus weren't so closely monitored back then, and those are where we're seeing declines now. So the nature of the, I mean, I'm sorry, I know I can't answer your question right now, but that is kind of what we're...
Quality versus volume situation. We had really bad stuff going on at one time, but it wasn't in every place along the lakes or in all the lakes. It was certain communities, certain industrial sites, and and particularly in Winnipesaukee, there's a lot of absorption capability, a large volume of water there. But what we've shifted to is something with a lower impact that's spread over a larger area. And it's in our atmosphere, it starts there. A lot of nitrates and phosphorus come down in our rainfall that comes up from our stacks. And we have a lot more of that. We're burning, we know from the global warming thing that we're burning a lot more stuff. We've got a lot more road surface than we had. It's paved, so it sheds water quickly. Our whole purpose of our engineers is to get water from the road surface into, off the road surface, and that means into a stream somewhere. And then we have done a lot to straighten out our streams and reduce our wetlands, which have absorption capabilities. We've developed a lot of our forest area. The good news is we don't have as much agriculture, which could have been an effect, but now it's development. I was kidding. About every 5 minutes I'm ready to jump in. I think it's unfortunate that we have this separate chapter. It's part of a housing situation. It's part of the transportation situation. It's part of everything we do. And it's water quality. If you look at the numbers, water quality in the Lakes region, everything is built on that. Our whole economy, our job situation, the reason people live here, it's all about the lakes. And the lakes, it's about the quality of the water in them. So I think we need to pay a lot more attention to these issues. You know, you look at some little minor things like milfoil, and we just ignored it for a long time. Now we have to spend millions of dollars trying to get rid of it. And all the other problems that we face today, geez, to think about this global warming stuff. If we did everything that we've talked about, everything that we've dreamed about, we would still be producing more greenhouse gases than we ever did before. It's not dealing with the problem. The way we live is unsustainable. And I think, you know, I'm going to die before it kills me. But think about our kids and our grandchildren, what we're leaving them, the mess that we're leaving them. Sorry about that. But it's just on my mind constantly. The last paying job I did, I worked on the New York City watershed plant up in the Catskills. And water quality is what it's all about there. And they have a lot of development within their watershed, which is the biggest problem. But just the atmosphere alone is a huge challenge for them to produce the quality of water that the EPA requires for that large population. I learned a lot about water quality, worked on that project. Then I retired, moved up here, and I became LA Lakes monitor, and I got access to all the data. And yes, water quality is declining in most places, nearly all places where it's being measured. Water quality is declining. I grew up here, and then I went away for a career, and I came back. And it's unbelievable the difference in the water, particularly in Lrpc, for me as an observer. And there are a lot of little things going on that people don't pay attention to. The level of the water that we keep in our lakes, and then we got all these boats running around making wakes that are 3-4 times higher than the natural waves. Shoreline's eroding. Sorry.
No, I think you.
I can suck up the rest of your day.
No, that's how what it is writing these jobs. I mean, it really is. The interconnection is just it emerges constantly, and you're right. It's, you know, we need to have separate chapters just to make this project doable, but I agree with you 100%. It keeps coming up in all our committees. The fact that, oh wait,
housing, and you never have to think about water quality.
Right.
Or you can read about transportation, you never have to think about it because it's just not there. So unless you get to the water quality thing and actually read it, and why is anybody gonna read it? The engineers aren't gonna read it, the workforce housing people aren't gonna read it.
So you're already talking about the interconnectivity of water quality with housing, transportation, land use, everything.
Everything,
Maybe
yeah.
it should come first. Maybe these environmental chapters, need to be relocated because...
We as a population, we're not paying attention to that stuff. We don't want to. We don't want to know about it.
That's right.
Can Gary collaborate with you as he's doing this and, call you up and exchange information?
Oh, sure.
I wasn't gonna ask his permission, I was planning on it anyway.
I would think somehow connecting this to economic development,
Yeah.
to make people realize how important it is, because without the waters that we do have here in the lakes region, we have very little to attract or retain people.
Yeah.
Very, very little. I mean, without it, and so somehow this water has to be elevated in its importance.
We've had cyanobacteria blooms in Lrpc. In a little pond somewhere, or you would say, oh yeah, I understand that, so the water's green all the time. But you wouldn't expect to see that in Lrpc.
But this is true of all the other lakes in the region too, Ossipee, all those on that side of our region.
Right.
Lrpc is a smaller lake in Laconia. It was inundated with milfoil. Major effort to get it out of there. So it is not a Winnipesaukee issue, it's a lakes issue.
Right. There was a meeting Monday night in Concord of the lakes people to talk about milfoil since this past summer, and you might want to get in touch with, I'm trying to think his name, Bob something, who's now the development officer of Ossipee Lake Alliance, and he was one of the ones who organized this.
Craig Craft?
Sorry?
Bob Craig Craft?
No, but he's...
No,
It'll come.
There's another effort going on right now. I suspect this might be what you're talking about, to increase the boat registration fees in order to finance exotic weed control. And we're just meeting in Ossipee on that.
But our famous legislator just stripped the marine fund for general funding purposes that was there for Marine Patrol officers for safety reasons. They stripped it, and so the creating more dedicated funds is a good thing, so long as they keep their greedy hands off of it.
Right. Shields, Bob Shields.
Okay. Do you know that name?
If it isn't, if you don't, just send me an email across and I can get it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
But I know the meeting was in Concord and it was all of the state people. I
Okay.
think they've had 18 more places that they haven't had it.
Oh.
And it's now occurred.
Was that New Hampshire Lakes
Yes.
Association?
No,
Oh.
no.
Okay, that's all right. And now that I've got the name,
Yeah.
yeah.
But if you can't find it, just send me an email.
Okay, thanks.
I would certainly like to see something in there, or more on the milfoil situation.
Yeah, and again, this gets to the interconnectivity of all this. That we did decide to talk about invasives in the environment chapter. So I've got a note here, and again, the connection to economic development. A lot of that's going to show up in the environment chapter, but it definitely has a place here. So,
But one of the concerns I have is that it's pretty much, it's a statewide problem, and it eliminates lakes. I mean, we have one pond, Brindle Pond, that's still on track, but there are questions there that what will happen if the study shows that there's erosion on private property. Does this mean then that the property owner is going to be mandated to do something about it? And it's just this...
it's the sort of like, don't touch it, or let's not bring it up. If we do bring it up, let's make sure, keep it. It's delicate territory, because the fear is that it's going to open up a Pandora's box of regulation and oversight.
I guess that would be it, that there's going to be regulation and state seizure or control of private interests.
Okay.
Maybe
Which is
Dave is very familiar with it.
Yes. I mean, there are some state regulations regarding water, land use near waters,
Yeah, sure.
so the shoreline, the Comprehensive Shoreline Protection Act, and that sort of thing.
Which are generally not enforced unless there's an irate neighbor.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
And then, but there are questions about, who are the stewards of these publicly owned water bodies, and there have been questions raised about, this has happened in other situations, like when I've worked on hazard mitigation plans, there have been concerns, gee, if we identify a potential hazard, are we then obligated to address it? And the answer is, you should be addressing it, at least identifying it, so that somewhere down the road you can. Do you have to deal with it immediately? No. But putting your head in the sand is not responsible. Yes?
Can I ask a question? Now, this is just of general knowledge. Where do you obtain all this knowledge, or do you people have it upstairs? All the different towns that are doing watershed studies now, or the information that's out there that is available, or do you need help from the different commissioners to find out what's going on in their towns?
We have special powers.
Special powers, I see.
The state has an awful lot of information on water resources.
Yeah, the state's been, I would say over the past, I guess now it's more than 5 years, but there's a water resources primer that was a very well run public process to develop a water resources primer, which really catalogs a lot of what's going on in New Hampshire. And then there's a recently there was a legislative water resources commission that did a great deal of work through New Hampshire Listens and other avenues to get a good sense of what's going on in the state. So statewide, we do have a good picture. I think though some of the regional specifics, they obviously need to be in the chapter. I don't know, maybe there is an opportunity to enhance.
It's a lot of good data on what the status of wastewater treatment plants are, what the needed upgrades are, water supply, what the upgrades are. Gary's been working on stormwater management issues at the local level. I think a lot of that information would be helpful for the chapter. That's being looked at more as a utility, like.
Yeah.
Well, maybe DES?
Well, I mean,
would they give you a listing of the towns that they've recently funded for studies?
yes, they could, yeah.
Because I know that's what's funding the Ossipee one right now.
Your comment just, I guess, got my mind thinking, and just generally, what does each town have to say about what they're up to? Whether it may not be a grant through DES, and so I might not get that through DES. Maybe I should send out a survey form or something.
Yeah.
That's a
To
good
just
idea.
say, what's your, and of course, the workshop is intended to bring in some of that feedback as well, but if every public works director in every one of our towns was asked the question, what's up with your water resources plan, and they had the opportunity to chime in on that, maybe that would be good.
And this is somewhat bridging the gap, between water infrastructure and natural resources, which I know you're also working on, and some of what Dave was talking about, is there are as you know, a number of groups, many of them local group, combinations of local groups of people working together, and often because water is a regional sort of thing, it's not just within one town or city, but dealing with water and the impacts of land within that watershed and activity within that. And most of them are citizen groups, and oftentimes they've been able to come together, develop a watershed management plan, or to help tease out what are the important issues associated with caring for, helping to care for this important resource. And what are some issues that might be particular to this particular area or region.
There's models where you plug in development trend and predict development, and then what does that do to phosphorus levels and nitrate levels,
right,
and things like that.
But really, I want to stress that a lot of these groups are groups of citizens like yourselves, well-meaning, in many cases quite knowledgeable folks who are working together and building on each other's strengths and doing outreach and stewardship within their community or region.
What you're saying is absolutely, the Lrpc group is using Forest Balsos Environmental Associates, I think it's called, from just over in Maine, and they're doing this with mathematical models, so they're plugging in all the information that this whole group has been digging out of the Lrpc Lake over the last 4 months, 3 months. And it's fascinating because they can get so much of, well, if this is the one that increases, or that's the one that increases, what happens with this area?
It tells you where to look, but you really have to look at your own unique situation before you can apply a solution. Private wells, is that on your list?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on, we've got wastewater, stormwater, drinking water as one of the major topics. Certainly when we get to drinking water, we'll talk about the fact that so much of our region is dependent on private wells. I think that's how we'll talk about it, but it's not call, I believe.
In Lakes region, there's probably a 30% chance that you have significant quantities of arsenic or radon in the average private well.
I'll make sure that yes.
Radon for sure.
There are significant health effects to that.
Okay.
And there is nobody who can tell you. I've not dutifully done what you all told me to do about a month ago and had my water sent away and got my result back, and they say, but we can't tell you what this means.
Oh.
Did you have above average levels of certain chemicals?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, it was radon I was testing, and I have no idea if it's above or below average because it just gave me my figure and then said, well, we really don't know whether this is meaningful or not.
There was radon in your air or water?
Yeah, this is the water. We were doing that first. We're doing the air as well, but we're waiting for the builders to get out.
Okay, go to DES website.
Yeah. And maybe they will tell me.
There
Because
is.
this was a batch of stuff. I mean, I went to the hardware shop, you know, and got my little package and dutifully did what they said. And then that's what came back was...
Or you can call Cynthia Clevin at DES.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have her number on me, but
Cynthia?
Clevins.
Okay.
And
I just need to know a figure.
Tell her the number and she'll tell you what
Okay.
you need to know.
Thank you. But you know, it ought to be easier than that.
Yeah, right.
It should be. Yeah, anything
Go
else
ahead.
to add?
That's my question, I guess, would be to the group, is, are we, are there anything, other comments you'd like to make that I can incorporate into this outline and use when I write the chapter? I've definitely hogged more than my share of the time.
Well, it's
With my help.
important.
What's that?
With my help.
No, I think we're ready for a first draft, and a first look at, and
Okay.
the sooner you can get it out to us, the better.
Okay.
Okay. And as a draft, I mean, it doesn't even have to be complete, but just to begin to get people thinking and
Okay,
feeding back to you.
right.
Okay, do you want to go on to your energy efficiency in green buildings since you're here?
Sure, yeah, if that's all right with you, Dave, yeah. So the outline in this is a little bit more detailed, I think a little bit tighter subject area. But you've got your introduction. I think it's important to talk about the environmental, social, and economic side of this, as with I think all these topics. Then we talk about energy planning and green building in the region, set goals and priorities, and then I think with energy and green building there's a lot of time. It's worth dedicating some time to talking about how the master plan is a way to get communities starting to think along these lines. I think here in our region we've seen some success with master plan chapters.
Connie just added one.
Yeah, right.
Thank you guys helped with it.
Thank you.
That was very good.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that there's a coordination or a link between those towns that are starting to look at the energy master plan chapters and some follow-up actions that start to take place. So we'd like to see energy chapters in all 30 regional master plans. Next, what has the region done or is already doing, we need to talk about again. This is a slightly different format from some of my other chapters. Just seemed to flow this way well for this. What has the region done or is already doing, and then local support for energy committee and energy planning, and then our recommendations.
It's a fellow named Wes Comeau who teaches at Lakes Region Community College, and he likes to use the phrase, you have to eat your energy efficiency vegetables first before you can eat your energy renewable dessert. So he likes to put emphasis on the energy efficiency side. And they have a course down there. We'd like to use him as a technical resource person. Person to bounce ideas off
When it comes to reviewing that chapter, you may want to hold this meeting there.
of. That's a good idea.
Right. Spreading things around.
Yeah.
That'd be neat.
Sorry, what was that? When Laconia reviews the master plan chapter? Oh.
With this chapter, when it comes time to do that in this format,
Okay.
as this has been moved to the Hewitt Center and things like that, but maybe have it there at the community college. It's as easy to get to as here. You just keep going down the road.
Okay. He knows my problems in this area. To me, this whole thing is a learning chapter, so I'm looking forward to your first draft.
But energy is interrelated with zoning and planning and
Absolutely.
transportation and all these issues. And Gary's got some special expertise. You used to work for the Office of Energy and Planning, and you manage the energy efficiency program.
Yes, that's right. I think you could say that is what enabled Laconia's master plan chapter, the ETAP program that came out of the ECBG program. And of course, the other element to the ECBG program was the grants that we did with many of our Lakes Region towns. I think Laconia was one. Tufton Monroe was one, I think. Anyway, there were several communities in the Lakes region.
I believe the town of Effingham got a grant
Effingham,
for
yes,
their-
that's right,
for their wood boiler
that's right.
in their town office, or pellet boiler, which is gonna save them a lot of money.
Tough in the north also.
Townhouse.
There's a factor, a lot of low-grade wood right now goes to producing electrical energy, which is about 20% efficient. Depends on subsidies to pay off, versus if that same wood fiber was used to produce heat energy, it would be 90 plus. And the cheapest source of fuel that we have, and it's local. Doesn't have to go anywhere. Best kept secret in New Hampshire or the Northeast.
An interesting read, if you ever just looking for something to read on energy and that sort of thing. Sandwich, a couple years back, updated their master plan, and among other things in there, I don't know that they specifically had an energy chapter, but they calculated that they had enough wooded area to sustainably, within their town, to sustainably heat the town.
Wow, sustainably.
Yeah.
Oh.
Now, they're a big community, and half of their town right now is in the White Mountain National Forest.
A lot of it is available for wood production.
Yes. And there are a number of people who, A, make their livelihoods in the forest industry, and B, do heat.
And it's a closed carbon cycle, because it does release carbon when you burn wood, but trees absorb carbon. So it's basically a zero carbon cycle. And you can buy wood energy today that works just as good as gas or oil. The pellets come by truck and go into a silo and automatically feed into your furnace. And the repairman can come fix it just as good as any other system. But it costs about 60% or 40% less.
Would these be wood pellets or wood chips?
Wood pellets take the work out of it. Chips are good for my vocabulary is going with my memory. In an institutional type setting where you can bring a truckload and dump it into a bin, and then it's automatically loaded into a large furnace. It doesn't work well, chips don't work well in the home because it can't be mechanized. But the nice thing about wood pellets, even though it takes some energy to produce them, they can be burned so efficiently and regulated mechanically that it takes all the work out of it.
Just on this pellet point, Lowe's in Guilford, Laconia, you go into the garden center and they shut it down really for the winter, but I was just out in there, and that entire center area, huge area, is just pallet upon pallet upon pallet. And I went over to see what the devil was in those pallets, and it was all wood pellets. It's a huge area, and I cannot think that they're using it as a central warehouse for many stores. I would think that they have focused on the marketability of that inventory, but you people are over in that area.
School calling, excuse me.
Sure. You should just stop in to see it. It's
I'm
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
The amount of pallets that they have there.
Hey, how are you?
You know, it's like half a football field.
Did you notice where they were manufactured?
No, I did not.
I mean, what I've noticed on the bags of them, often they're virtually all out of state.
Well, I don't know, but
And there is
I
a
was
big
just-
operation down in Jaffrey, but,
Not from Barnstable.
Sorry.
right, Barnstable.
But if you over there,
almost had it.
just take a walk in and see it. It is really a visual impact of the importance of that product, because stores at their store level don't carry things that they're not going to be able to sell there.
Yeah.
Barry, one of the other things is geothermal. Are you mentioning that or talking about that at all? Because in addition to the fact that there are certainly houses that are being constructed now, and they advertise that. My sister has put this into her new house, and they had to fracture the drilling in order to get enough water to support the system. And my concern or interest really is, well, what does this do? And obviously she's pulling 4 times more water out of hers, which has to, in order to have enough water to come through the house, than we have out of our well. And what does this do to everybody else's wells?
It's going right back in though, isn't it? It's just a
Doesn't
loop.
it has to go back in?
Well, eventually, yes,
Yeah,
but
the
it
ground
also
in
is
some
it's going back into the ground, yeah. But whether it affects everybody else's wells is really,
I
in
know,
towns like Freedom that are all wells, I mean, they have no water.
well, I know over in Wolfboro, the regional school there, when they did add a large addition to the school, they also, there was money that was specifically voted on to put in geothermal heat for virtually the entire, I believe, the entire school complex, and it's, basically under the football field.
They reduced their fuel consumption by 80%.
I mean, it took $1 million+ to put it in,
Yes.
but they're gonna get it back.
You
Well,
might
I think
highlight
it's
that
worth talking about
in
it.
this chapter.
I think,
The
and
energy
I think
chapter.
there are some other institutional areas that are, places that are taking advantage of that.
Yeah, because my sister has done this with the understanding that her children will carry on, and eventually during their lifetime, it will even itself up. We weren't so sure about our children, so we didn't do that. But it is a long time. It is a long-term payoff. It isn't instant, and it's a lot, as you say, particularly privately, it's a huge investment. You have to have that money to do it. But they love
I
it.
think it was that much, it may have been less.
The other thing is, what I want, solar collectors.
Okay.
I think that is something that should be mentioned too.
I mean, I think we have to be careful not to let this turn into too technical of a chapter. So if you don't mind, I won't plan on going into the nuts and bolts of these technologies,
No.
but I think there's a place to
Yeah,
mention.
just to
okay.
mention, just
All right.
that these things are out there if you wanted to.
Okay.
Or if towns wanted to investigate, but yes.
All right.
Okay, guys, we have one more chapter. Ready?
I took the call to use outline and tried to stick to that. I tend to think in outline format anyway. Thank you for taking a look at this. This is the chapter on natural hazards and climate change. I come at it from my experience over the last several years, last 5 years or so, of working on hazard mitigation plan, local hazard mitigation plans, and would certainly tap into what we see from communities as identified potential hazards, flooding, severe winter weather, high winds, and some fire, a little bit of earthquake. We're certainly in an earthquake potential zone. And then looking at, how vulnerable are we? And really the big deal is the impacts, the potential impacts that any hazard may have on a community or a region. And there certainly have been examples of there are plenty of examples of those that can be addressed. And for many of them, the potential concern, the concerns have to do with impacts to infrastructure, such as roads, and power lines and that sort of thing. And this is really telling a story. You know, here are the potential hazards in this region. You know, we're not going, tsunamis are not a big deal around here. But there are some specific half dozen or so that can and do impact our region from time to time, some more frequently than others, some more massively than others. And here are the potential impacts. We'll try and quantify as much as possible. That's something that we've begun doing more and more with the hazard mitigation plans that we've been helping communities develop. And then point out that over time there have been changes that have been occurring to the climate, and in some cases that has an impact on the weather. I've had a couple of road agents certainly bring up during our discussions in hazard mitigation plans that, you know, we need to start thinking about what are the, if we're looking at roads, we need to be and we're looking at replacing culverts, we need to be thinking about what are the potentials that are going to be happening down the road, and regarding the infrastructure. And you know, there could be some impact on the economy. We've been hearing a lot lately about potential scenarios in the future. You know, if things keep going as they are, gee, our climate might be similar to Northern Virginia, or even North Carolina in my grandchildren's lifetime. And there are potential costs, maybe potential benefits. You know, North Carolina's not a bad place. It's just not New Hampshire. And so then we're looking at how to address that, really. And I think, and as we work through our hazard mitigation plans, we always end up with, okay, we'd like to mitigate the impact of hazard events. What steps need to be done to do that? Either you mitigate or you adapt to those events. You know, we talked about the black road policy. Are you going to clear all the roads after every event, or are you going to adapt? And really mitigation in a lot of ways is trying to either build things where they're not going to be damaged as much. They're not so likely to be as susceptible to damage when you build it. And it's not how do we respond to things, but how do we try and reduce the potential impact. And those are concerns that communities have, because and typically we have found that it's often pointed out that mitigating, that each dollar spent on looking to mitigate the impacts tends to save about $4 in having to respond to that impact. Now there are some things that you can't, you know, a tornado could hit just about anywhere. you can try and prepare yourself for that. But, so you could, and there have been a lot fewer damages due to tornadoes in those areas where they have built to mitigate the impacts of a tornado on buildings. Flooding tends to be the biggest issue in the lakes in this region. And, you know, certainly the tropical depression Irene showed there are a lot of impacts, and trying to construct roads and especially where they cross water in ways that have reduced costs, or can reduce costs in the long run, can reduce the impacts of a large event, can save communities, can save even lives if you plan for it. So, this is the outline that I came up with. I'd love to get your input on it. The idea was we just talked about having a similar workshop type thing in late February, where we would talk about hazards in the region, impacts of hazards, and ways of mitigating hazards. So, in a nutshell, that's the direction we've been thinking in. Love to get your input.
FEMA.
Yes?
Do you mention FEMA at all?
Yes.
You do, okay.
Dealing with infrastructure, they do a lot of, they certainly are a funder, the major funder of the work that we do. This isn't necessarily in this plan, but we work with FEMA. They help in paying for the development of hazard mitigation plans. They also are the mapping agency responsible for floodplain, the National Flood Insurance Program. They certainly respond in the event of an emergency. They also are, if a community has projects identified in their local hazard mitigation plan as mitigation projects, well, basically for FEMA to provide some funding for those projects, mitigation projects, it needs to be in a hazard mitigation plan. And oftentimes those are they provide 75 or 80% of the funding for those projects. Mitigation projects.
In Southwest Harbor in Maine, which is where I worked before on the coast, the relationship of the town with FEMA was such that if FEMA was satisfied that you filled out their requirements for having made accessible, particularly accessible, all of the documents of FEMA and explained and had the right things in your ordinances, you could make it possible for people with flood insurance to have that reduced. And I just don't know if that's possible in this state or not, because I've asked in Freedom of the people on the boards, and they don't seem to know what I'm talking about. But certainly it was done for the benefit of the people of the town, that they could gain a real reduction in their insurance policies.
If communities can work on, find ways to, there are ways to reduce that. Very few communities in New Hampshire have done that. There is a state floodplain manager based at Office of Energy and Planning, and she can assist. She's beginning to work with some communities in doing that. It requires
Well, it might be worth mentioning this because nobody seems to know about it, and it really helps because as at least 10 did in Southwest Harbor, it was the poor homes, the mobile homes that were the ones beside the streams.
Sure.
So that they were the ones who really needed to be able to carry this insurance and to be able to say that you could reduce it.
And
was a help.
And I believe all the communities in our region do have, yes, they all are participating in the National Flood Insurance Program, which enables anyone in the community to have flood insurance. You don't have to be in the floodplain to be able to purchase flood insurance, and you can purchase that flood insurance through FEMA or through a private agency. But to make that available, the town does have to basically have a flood insurance policy and keep that up in flood insurance ordinance, and there are different levels of flood ordinance that are required based on the amount of the type of floodplain and flood potential damage, and they have to keep working on it and enforce it. Yes.
I'd suggest that you tap into the Lakes Region Mutual Fire, I forget what their other name is. That's an outstanding organization, and they do so much, and they are our first responders regionally in terms of natural disasters and hazards and how they have planned to address it. And it's not a well understood organization that has huge impact, because most of the fire chiefs in all the different communities are members of that, on their board or whatever. And in our community, our fire chief is our emergency manager. And so there's a linkage there that we should incorporate somehow here.
What is the name of the group that you're talking
It's the Lakes Region Mutual Fire, I forget not an organization.
Association? Or?
It's something like that. We had a speaker, the deputy chief came there and explained it to us, and it is absolutely fascinating, the organization that they have between the towns and cities to cooperate in terms of when fires and disasters happen. How if they have it all organized so that if a fire happens in one community and it's been identified by that chief as a commercial area, they already know what pieces of equipment need to be rapidly deployed. And so they send out a first tone and it puts this plan into place. And they have a plan for a second tone, and then they have a plan for, well, what happens if there's a major disaster in Freedom and all of a sudden one appears in Guilford. They've got that figured out. And they are the people that are our emergency managers.
And it's also it also means that communities, it's a regionalization or
very much
sharing.
So. Yes.
Because for one community to carry all the equipment and staff that would be necessary to respond to all their stuff, and then the town next door have to respond, be completely self-contained.
And then they link region by region.
I
mean, when the Lakes region is tapped out because of the incidents that are happening right now, then they tap into Concord. And it's a linkage thing throughout the entire state that I think in the Granite State Future Plan, it would be very good not only to recognize but to seek their input as to how to address some of these natural hazards, and it will give comfort to people knowing that this is there. Because many of our municipalities operate in the silo concept, and this is not.
My experience, we've had tornadoes, floods, the ice storms and everything, and yes, mutual aid and the fire folks are there and they have a system, but when the bottom line is the work, all our disasters have been, need dump trucks, chainsaws, and loaders, and backhoes. It's, yes, they have, we're all set for disastrous fires and train wrecks and plane crashes, but dump trucks, loaders, backhoes are what we need for disasters, and I think that's where there's an association of the public, it's the New Hampshire, the Public Works Association, $25 a year, a town can, has a mutual aid among the highway departments.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that, that's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
And so there is a cooperation
Yeah,
there.
it's through T-squared down at UNH.
Yeah. And that's very valuable. If you need, for the types of disasters we have, just call up them and you'll get the dump trucks and the loaders.
We're also working with communities. There's training on how to deal with debris management. And so DPWs can get, and emergency response folks can get training on that, and develop plans for, how are we going to deal with all this, and then working with communities. They may not go that far, but they, developing lists of who are the private contractors in the area that we can call.
I think having that kind of information in here will add credibility, and this will make it a much more user-friendly or resource for all the municipalities. Because in the municipalities, selectmen change all the time, and the department heads don't change as quickly, but there are people that don't know any of this stuff, and so to have it highlighted in here that such things exist, maybe it's not expanded, but it's just, hey, these things exist.
Right.
Who's any of that group?
It's the Public Works Association?
Public Works Association, if you go to UNH T-squared, T2, one of their pages is the Public Works Mutual Aid.
Your road agent, I'm sure, knows about it. I think virtually every town is in it.
Many do.
Our road agent doesn't know a lot.
And there's been some transition. They have a map of the state of which communities are participating right there.
We don't get into public safety at all in the Granite State Future, do we?
Not directly.
That's a whole world unto itself.
Yeah.
Again, it's a silo effect.
But, this does impact public safety a little bit, with emergency responders, first responders.
Yeah, I was thinking of the police activities, public safety from that nature. Towns, cities, counties, and all that kind of stuff. That's a huge area. That's very good, very good.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this?
No, I think you're
No, I think it would be.
confident in what you do is going to be a good product.
Yes, it's all new knowledge. Have a check on seeing with this group that you're talking about, because I don't know the name of that, your Lakes Region Mutual Fire Association, because...
Go up online, they've got a really good website and it talks all about it.
Well, maybe they do, but maybe they do reflect us, but I just know that Freedom works with West Ossipee, with Ossipee, with Eaton, with Madison. I don't know if maybe this is another region, because they're all mutual aid, I know that. 'cause
I
they
think
help
you're
each
tying into
other out.
this one.
You think we're tying into that?
Yeah, it's not similar to the Lakes Region Planning Commission area.
Right.
They have larger areas,
Right.
and as I recall from this presentation,
Yeah.
there's 50 or 60
well,
communities
then it
that are
probably
into
is.
the Lakes
Yeah.
Region.
And which wouldn't be needed unless we had a forest fire.
Apologize, I have to leave.
Well, that's okay, I don't blame you, you've been very good to stay for an extra hour, which is what we're moving up to. Anything else on any other subject that you'd like to raise before we actually go home for lunch?
So our next meeting is January 22nd.
Okay?
And if we have a snowstorm, it'll be a week later, the 29th.
Okay.
I'm here in January. I'm hoping to go to visit my son in Florida.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Oh, good.
Would be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
I really appreciate all the work that the.
The staff has done, they've been tremendous, yes, and you must be working night and day. Yes.
Working day, not necessarily, no.
Okay, thank you, you're adjourned.
Thank
Bye. I always end up with this mess, look at it.